Hello students, my name is Krumal Patel and welcome to Sri Jaindra's Drawing Zone classes. I am your mentor for classes with respect to economics, that is paper 4 of CA Foundation course. In last lecture, we have completed unit 1 of chapter 1. Today onwards, we have started unit 2 of chapter 1, that is basic problem of an economy and role of price mechanism. Price mechanism in different types of market. First of all, we are discussing roadmap of chapter 1 unit 2. We segregated unit 2 curriculum into 5 parts. First part is economic problem. Second part is 4 basic or central economic problems. Part 3 is the capitalist economy, under which we discuss characteristics of capitalist economy, merits and demerits of the said economy. Part 4 is socialist economy, under which we will discuss characteristics, merits and demerits of socialist economy. And last part of the unit 2, that is part 5, is mixed economy, under which we will discuss characteristics, merits and sector deals under mixed economics. Now, today we have started with the first part of unit 2, that is economic problem. Pay attention, friends. What is economic problem? After considering the following points, we shall aware of economic problem. First, all countries without exception. All countries without exception means all the countries of the world faces the economic problem. Now, what is economic problem? Problem of scarcity. Economic problem is problem of scarcity. All the countries without exception. Without exceptions means no country debarred from economic problem. Therefore, all the countries in the world face the economic problem, that is problem of scarcity. Why problem of scarcity arises, friends? Because resources are limited and these resources have alternative uses. Resources are limited and they have alternative uses. All the countries without exception faces economic problem, that is problem of scarcity. Why problem of scarcity arises? Because these resources are limited and these resources have alternative uses. So economic problem arises only when there are two parameters or two conditions satisfied. First is resources are limited and resources have alternative use. So friends, if the resources are unlimited, people would be able to satisfy all their needs or wants, and there would be no economic problem. So if resources are unlimited, there would be no economic problem. Alternatively, if the resources have only a single use, then also economic problem would not arise, because economic problem of scarcity arises only when resources are limited and resources have alternative uses. If any of two parameters is absent, then economic problem would not arise. Therefore, if the resources are unlimited or resources have only single use, there would be no economic problem arises. Next, in other words, since humans' wants are unlimited, our wants are unlimited, and resources to satisfy these wants are scarce. Resources are scarce. There is need to make the best possible use of resources so as to get maximum satisfaction. This is generally called as central economic problem. Central economic problem. So friends, what we have discussed under point D: first, human wants are unlimited. Second, resources to satisfy these unlimited wants are scarce. Third, so there is a need of make the best possible use or way of resources. Third is to make the best possible use of resources. Fourth is, why best possible use of resources, friends? To get maximum satisfaction. This is called generally as the central economic problem. So under point D, friends, point D is the most important from exam point of view. It is the most important from exam point of view. Human wants are unlimited, and the resources to satisfy these wants or those wants are scarce in nature. So there is a need to make best possible use of resources so as to get the, friends, what is with satisfaction? Get the maximum satisfaction. This is generally called as central economic problem. So friends, till time we discuss 4 point ABCD for economic problem. Under point A, we discuss all the countries without exception, that is all the countries of the world face the problem of economy, that is problem of scarcity, because resources are limited and these resources have alternative use. Friends, point 1 is also marked as the important for exam point of view. So under point A, we discuss, friends, all the countries without exception face the economic problem, that is problem of scarcity, because why problem of scarcity arises? Because resources are limited and resources have alternative use. Now, if the resources are unlimited, then people would able to satisfy all the wants with these unlimited resources. So there is no economic problem, which is problem of scarcity. So under point B, we have seen that if the resources were unlimited, people would able to satisfy all their needs or wants, and there would be no economic problem. Then next, if the resources have only a single use or resources have no alternative use, then also economic problem, that is problem of scarcity, would not arise, because problem of scarcity arises only when there are two parameters existed. First is resources are limited, and second is resources have alternative uses. Then we have discussed point D, where we have seen that human wants are, we have seen that how many factors? 4. First is human wants are unlimited. Second is resources to satisfy those unlimited wants are scarce or limited. Third is, so there is a need. Need for what? Need to make best possible use of resources. Fourth, why best possible use of resources, friends? To get maximum satisfaction. This is generally called as central economic problem. Now, next point, central economic problem further divided into 4 parts. Further divided into 4 basic economic problem. First is what to produce. Second is how to produce. Third is for whom to produce. Fourth is what provision are to be made for economic growth. So under central economic problem, we have to face or we have to discuss 4 basic problems, which are as follow. Problem number 1, what to produce. Problem number 2, how to produce. Problem number 3, for whom to produce. And problem number 4 is what provision or mechanism are to be made for economic growth. Till time we have completed our first part of chapter 1 of unit 2. So it's unit 2 of chapter 1, that is economic problem. Economic problem, under which we have discussed 5 parts. First is problem of scarcity arises in all the countries over the world because resources are limited and have alternative use. Resources are unlimited, there is no economic problem. And resources have single use, then also there is no economic problem. Then human wants are unlimited, resources to satisfy these wants are limited, so there is a need to make best possible use and to get maximum satisfaction. Then we say that central economic problem divided into 4 basic problems, which can easily understand by diagrammatic presentation. It is here. Basic or central economic problem. Basic or central economic problems, which are divided into 4 parts. First is what to produce. Second is how to produce. Third is for whom to produce. And fourth is what provision or mechanism are to be made for economic growth. So to determine central economic problem, we have to consider four basic economic problems. First is what to produce. Second is how to produce. Third is for whom to produce. And fourth is what mechanism of provision required to be made for economic growth. Now friends, we will discuss each and every problem, that is all the basic problem in detail for better understanding. First problem is what to produce. First problem is what to produce. Since resources are limited, as we seen that resources are limited under economic problem, society has to decide which goods and services should be produced, which goods and services would be produced, and how many units of each goods and service should be produced. So resources are limited so that we cannot satisfy all the needs or all the wants of the society, so that society has to decide which product or services or which goods or services should be produced first, and how many units or quantities of each goods or services should be produced to get maximum utilization or maximum satisfaction. Every society has also to decide what quantity of each goods, what quantity of each of these goods would be produced. So under what to produce problem, society has to decide three question or three problem have been answered. First is society has to decide which goods and services should be produced. Second is how many units of each goods or services should be produced. And third is each goods or services in what quantity would be produced. So here society has to decide product or goods or services produced, nature of goods or services should be produced, and quantities of goods or services should be produced. Then second problem is how to produce. So society has to decide here method of production, that is whether to use labor intensive technique or capital intensive technique. Obviously the choice would depends on the availability of the different factor of production, that is labor and capital, and their relative prices also. Here society has to decide how to produce the product or service determined in earlier question. Here society has to decide method of production, whether to use labor intensive or capital intensive, which depends on availability of the different factor of production and their relative prices. Here various cost benefit analysis and other analytical tool has been inserted to determine which material should be used and which type of labor, that is skilled, unskilled, semi-skilled, would be employed to produce goods or service determined under problem number 1, that is what to produce. Then problem number 3, for whom to produce. After deciding product or service should be produced, how product or service should be produced, now society has to decide about the members or targeted audience for whom product, goods or service would be produced. So here society has to decide for whom to produce. Society has to decide how goods or services should be distributed among the members of the society. In other words, here society has to decide about the shares of different person in consumption of product or services. Here society has to decide how goods or services which have been produced under problem number 2 shall be distributed among the member. So here distribution channel has to be developed by the society which faces different scenario which have to be considered while decide to whom the product or services have been distributed. And problem number 4, what provision or mechanism are to be made for economic growth? What provision made for economic growth? If society uses all the resources for current consumption and no provision is made for future production. If society uses all the resources for current and no provision for future consumption or production, then it will become static and lead to decline in standard of living, as all the resources are used in the present or current consumption. So there is a major scarcity of resources arises for future production, which leads to decrease in the standard of living of the person. Therefore, society has to decide how much saving and investment parameters should be made for future progress. Here society has to decide how much investment and saving, that is how much sacrifice of current consumption which enable for the future progress required to be made has been decided under problem number 4. So friends, we discussed there are 4 basic economic problems. First is what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce, and what provision shall be required or are to be made for economic growth. So we have completed our second part of the unit 2, that is 4 basic economics problems. Till time today we had discussed 2 important aspects of the chapter. First is what is economic problem, second is 4 basic or central economic problem in detail. Now we are revise the first two part in quick manner to conclude our today's session, and next session we started the other part of the unit 2, that is capitalist economy. So what is economic friends? Economic problem friends? First, there are 5 points. First point is all the countries without exception, that is all the countries of world face the problem of scarcity because resources are limited and resources have alternative use. And the second point we discussed, if resources are unlimited, there would be no economic problem. Point 3 is if the resources have only single use, then also there would be no economic problem would arise. Point number 4 is, which is marked as a important, since human wants are limited, resources to satisfy those wants are limited or scarce. So there is a need to make best possible use of resources so as to get maximum satisfaction. This is generally called the central economic problem. And point number 5, we seen that central economic problem divided into 4 basic problems. First is what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce, and what provision are to be made for economic growth, which are further clarified by diagrammatic representation. Then we had discussed what to produce. Here society has to decide which goods or service should be produced and how many units of each goods and services should be produced, and also decide what quantities of goods would be produced. The problem number 2, how to produce, society has to decide method of production, whether to use labor intensive techniques or capital intensive technique, which decision of method of production depends on the availability of the different factor of production along with their relative prices. And after determining first two problem, we seen that problem number 3, for whom to produce. Here society has to decide members among which goods and services should be distributed. And last problem, what provision are to be made for economic growth. Society, we seen that if the society uses all the resources for current consumption or current production and no provision shall be made for future production, there will be static and lead to decrease in the standard of living. Therefore, a society has to decide how much saving and investment should be made or how much sacrifice of current consumption should be made for future progress, which lead to economic growth or economic development in the country. So friends, today we conclude here. Remaining part started in the next session. Thank you.